Welcome back. Tonight, we travel back through centuries to explore the surprisingly fascinating history of one of humanity's favorite beverages, coffee. Whether you are listening while drifting off to sleep, relaxing after a long day, or simply curious about the past, settle in comfortably as we trace coffee's extraordinary journey from the mountains of East Africa to homes and cafes around the world. As always, the lights are low, the pace is gentle, and there is no need to stay awake until the end. Our story begins high in the misty mountains of Ethiopia, many centuries ago. According to legend, coffee was discovered by accident. The story tells of a young goat herder named Kaldi, who lived in the Ethiopian highlands sometime around the 9th century. One evening, Kaldi noticed something unusual about his goats. After grazing among certain bushes covered in bright red berries, the animals became strangely energetic. Instead of settling down quietly for the night, the goats remained awake. They leaped, ran, and jumped with unusual enthusiasm. Curious, Kaldi tasted some of the berries himself. Soon, he too felt more alert. Excited by his discovery, Kaldi carried the mysterious berries to a nearby monastery. The monks, however, were skeptical. Some accounts claim they considered the berries suspicious and threw them into a fire. As the berries roasted, a rich and inviting aroma filled the air. The monks quickly realized that they had stumbled upon something remarkable. Although historians cannot confirm whether Kaldi ever truly existed, the legend remains one of the most beloved stories in coffee history. The real origins of coffee are somewhat more mysterious. What historians do know is that wild coffee plants grew naturally in Ethiopia for thousands of years. Local communities likely consumed coffee in various forms long before it became a beverage. Some early peoples are believed to have crushed coffee cherries and mixed them with animal fat, creating portable energy-rich snacks for long journeys across rugged terrain. Others may have brewed leaves and fruit skins into simple infusions. At this stage, coffee was still a local curiosity rather than a global commodity. Everything would change when coffee crossed the Red Sea. By the 15th century, coffee had reached the Arabian Peninsula, particularly the region of Yemen. Here, coffee found fertile soil, both literally and culturally. Yemeni farmers began cultivating coffee systematically on mountain terraces overlooking the Red Sea. The climate proved ideal. It was in Yemen that people first developed the practice of roasting coffee beans, grinding them, and brewing them into a drink similar to the coffee we know today. The beverage quickly became popular. Sufi monks, devoted to long nights of prayer and meditation, discovered that coffee helped them remain awake during religious observances. Soon, coffee spread through religious communities and into cities across the Islamic world. Coffee houses began appearing in major centers such as Mecca, Cairo, Damascus, and Istanbul. These establishments became known as places of conversation, learning, business, and social life. People gathered to discuss politics, exchange news, play games, listen to music, and debate philosophy. Some historians have even called coffee houses the universities of the common people. Not everyone welcomed coffee's growing popularity. Authorities occasionally viewed coffee houses with suspicion. Large gatherings of citizens discussing ideas and current events could sometimes worry rulers. Several attempts were made to ban coffee throughout history. In Mecca, local authorities temporarily prohibited coffee in the early 16th century, fearing that public discussions might encourage political unrest. Yet every ban eventually failed. People simply loved coffee too much. By the 16th century, coffee had become deeply woven into everyday life across much of the Middle East. Merchants carried coffee beans along trade routes stretching across continents. European travelers visiting Ottoman cities often returned home with stories about this mysterious dark beverage. Soon, coffee itself would follow. And with it, the daily routines of millions of people would change forever. By the 17th century, coffee had already transformed daily life across much of the Middle East. But coffee's journey was only just beginning. European merchants, diplomats, and travelers who visited Ottoman cities returned home with stories of an unusual dark beverage consumed in bustling coffee houses. Many Europeans were fascinated. Others were deeply suspicious. At first, coffee arrived in Europe in relatively small quantities through Venetian merchants. Venice, one of Europe's great trading powers, maintained extensive commercial connections with the Ottoman Empire. By the early 17th century, coffee was being sold in Venetian markets. Not everyone approved. Some religious leaders viewed coffee with suspicion, calling it the bitter invention of Satan. The beverage had arrived from Muslim lands, and many Europeans were uncertain whether it should be consumed by Christians. According to popular tradition, the controversy eventually reached Pope Clement VIII. Rather than banning coffee, the Pope reportedly decided to taste it himself. To his surprise, he found the beverage delicious. Legend says that after sampling coffee, he declared that it would be a shame to leave such an excellent drink exclusively to non-Christians. Whether entirely true or not, coffee soon gained acceptance throughout Europe. Coffee houses quickly began appearing in major cities. The first coffee house in England opened in Oxford during the 1650s. Soon, London followed. Within only a few decades, hundreds of coffee houses operated throughout the city. These establishments rapidly became important social centers. Unlike taverns, which primarily served alcohol, coffee houses offered a stimulating environment where people remained alert and engaged in conversation. Merchants discussed trade. Scientists exchanged ideas. Writers debated literature. Politicians argued over current events. Ordinary citizens gathered to hear the latest news. In fact, many coffee houses developed specialized reputations. Some catered to businessmen. Others attracted artists, philosophers, or scholars. Certain establishments became famous throughout Europe. London's coffee houses became so influential that they earned a remarkable nickname. People called them penny universities. For the price of a single penny, customers could purchase a cup of coffee and participate in conversations with some of the most educated individuals in society. One never knew who might be sitting nearby. A merchant, a scientist, a writer, or perhaps an inventor. Ideas flowed freely. Business deals were negotiated. Friendships were formed. Entire industries sometimes emerged from conversations held over cups of coffee. One famous example involved a London coffee house frequented by ship owners, merchants, and insurers. Eventually, these informal meetings gave rise to Lloyd's of London, one of the world's most important insurance institutions. Coffee was no longer simply a beverage. It had become a social institution. Yet coffee's growing popularity also created challenges. European demand increased rapidly. transporting coffee from Arabia alone could no longer satisfy the market. European powers soon sought to cultivate coffee themselves. This decision would dramatically reshape global agriculture, international trade, and the lives of millions of people around the world. Coffee was about to become one of history's most valuable commodities, and empires were eager to control it. As coffee houses flourished across Europe, demand for coffee continued to rise. What had once been a rare and exotic beverage was rapidly becoming a daily habit for millions of people. European merchants faced an important challenge. Most of the world's coffee still originated from Arabia, particularly Yemen. Arab traders carefully protected their valuable commodity. For centuries, they maintained strict control over coffee cultivation. Fertile coffee plants and seeds were rarely allowed to leave the region. This monopoly made coffee expensive and highly profitable. European powers, however, were determined to break Arabia's control. The Dutch were among the first to succeed. During the late 17th century, Dutch traders managed to obtain coffee plants and transport them to their colonies in Southeast Asia. One colony, in particular, proved highly suitable for coffee cultivation. Java. Located in present-day Indonesia, Java possessed rich volcanic soil and an ideal climate. Coffee plantations soon spread across the island. The experiment proved enormously successful. Before long, Dutch-grown coffee was being shipped throughout Europe. In fact, the association became so strong that even today, in some parts of the world, coffee is still informally referred to as a cup of Java. Other European powers quickly followed. The French, Portuguese, and Spanish all sought to establish coffee plantations within their overseas colonies. According to a famous story, France obtained its first coffee plant in the early 18th century. A naval officer named Gabriel de Clos was entrusted with transporting a precious coffee seedling from Paris to the Caribbean island of Martinique. The journey was not easy. Storms threatened the ship. Pirates roamed the seas. Fresh water supplies became dangerously low. Legend claims that de Clos even shared his own drinking water with the delicate coffee plant to ensure its survival. Whether entirely true or not, the plant survived. From this single seedling, millions of coffee trees would eventually spread throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. Coffee cultivation expanded rapidly. By the 18th and 19th centuries, vast plantations covered large areas of the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. No country would become more closely associated with coffee than Brazil. Coffee first arrived in Brazil during the early 18th century. Over time, Brazil's climate and geography proved extraordinarily favorable for cultivation. By the 19th century, Brazil had become the world's largest coffee producer. It remains one of the leading producers today. Yet the global coffee trade came at a significant human cost. Many coffee plantations depended upon enslaved labor. Millions of enslaved Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic and compelled to work under harsh and often brutal conditions. The immense wealth generated by coffee was frequently built upon systems of exploitation and suffering. This difficult history remains an important part of coffee's story. As centuries passed, coffee became deeply integrated into global trade networks. Merchants transported beans across oceans. Ports bustled with activity. Entire economies became dependent upon coffee exports. For many nations, coffee transformed from a luxury product into an essential economic resource. By the 19th century, coffee had firmly established itself as one of the world's most important commodities. And for millions of people, the day simply could not begin without it. Coffee had conquered the world. But its influence extended far beyond trade and economics. It was also changing how people worked, thought, and lived. By the 19th century, coffee had become a truly global beverage. From bustling European capitals to remote colonial plantations, coffee was now deeply woven into everyday life. But coffee did far more than simply satisfy thirst. It quietly transformed human society. For much of history, water in large cities was often unsafe to drink. Alcoholic beverages, including beer and wine, were commonly consumed throughout the day because they were considered safer. Breakfast beer was not unusual in many parts of Europe. Coffee gradually changed these habits. Unlike alcohol, coffee sharpened the mind rather than dulling it. People who drank coffee remained alert, energetic, and productive. Historians have sometimes suggested that coffee helped fuel the intellectual and economic transformations of the modern world. As Europe entered the Age of Enlightenment during the 17th and 18th centuries, coffee houses became important gathering places for thinkers, writers, scientists, and philosophers. Many famous intellectuals regularly visited coffee houses. The French philosopher Voltaire was said to consume extraordinary quantities of coffee every day. Some accounts suggest he drank as many as 40 cups daily, although historians continue to debate the exact number. Writers, politicians, and inventors often spent countless hours discussing ideas over steaming cups of coffee. The atmosphere of the coffee house encouraged conversation. Unlike taverns, where alcohol sometimes led to disorder, coffee houses promoted discussion and debate. People exchanged news. Business agreements were negotiated. Scientific discoveries were shared. Political movements found support. Some historians even argue that modern democratic culture owes a small debt to the humble coffee house. As the Industrial Revolution transformed society during the 18th and 19th centuries, coffee assumed an even greater role. Factories operated for long hours. Workers often faced exhausting schedules. Coffee provided a welcome source of energy. Employers soon recognized that caffeinated workers could remain alert for extended periods. Coffee breaks gradually became part of daily routines. The modern workplace, with its familiar morning coffee and afternoon coffee break, began to emerge. Coffee also transformed domestic life. Families gathered around coffee tables. Guests were welcomed with freshly brewed coffee. Special coffee sets, elegant cups, and decorative serving rituals became symbols of hospitality and refinement. Different cultures developed their own unique traditions. In Turkey, coffee preparation became an art form. Traditional Turkish coffee was brewed slowly in small copper pots and served in delicate cups. The ritual became so important that UNESCO eventually recognized Turkish coffee culture as part of humanity's intangible cultural heritage. In Italy, espresso culture emerged. Coffee bars became central to social life. Customers often stood at counters, quickly enjoying a strong cup before continuing with their day. In Scandinavia, coffee consumption reached remarkable levels. Even today, countries such as Finland consistently rank among the world's highest consumers of coffee per person. Across continents and cultures, coffee adapted itself to local customs while retaining its essential character. By the early 20th century, coffee had become much more than a drink. It had become a ritual, a comfort, a daily companion. And for millions of people around the world, the day simply did not feel complete without it. Yet coffee's story was still evolving. New technologies, global conflicts, and changing consumer habits would continue to reshape humanity's relationship with this remarkable beverage. The age of modern coffee was about to begin. As the 20th century began, coffee had already become one of the world's most beloved beverages. Yet enormous changes still lay ahead. New technologies, global conflicts, and shifting lifestyles would transform coffee once again. One of the most significant developments came in the form of instant coffee. The idea of creating coffee that could be prepared quickly and easily had fascinated inventors for decades. Early experiments met with only limited success. However, during the early 20th century, improvements in manufacturing made instant coffee increasingly practical. In 1938, a Swiss company introduced a product that would become famous around the world. It was called Nescafé. The product offered something revolutionary. Coffee could now be prepared within seconds. All that was needed was hot water. For busy consumers, this convenience proved extremely attractive. Instant coffee soon found an even larger audience during times of war. During both the First and Second World Wars, coffee became an essential item for many soldiers. Military leaders understood that coffee helped maintain morale and alertness. Large quantities of instant coffee were included in military rations. For countless soldiers serving far from home, a simple cup of coffee provided comfort during difficult times. Some veterans returned home with lifelong coffee habits developed during their military service. As a result, coffee consumption increased dramatically after the wars. The post-war decades witnessed extraordinary economic growth in many countries. Coffee became firmly established as part of modern daily life. Morning coffee before work. Coffee breaks during the day. Coffee shared with friends and family. Entire routines revolved around the beverage. At the same time, cafes continued evolving. Traditional coffee houses remained important social spaces, but new styles also emerged. In Italy, espresso machines became increasingly sophisticated. The rich, concentrated beverage known as espresso spread throughout Europe and eventually across the world. From espresso came cappuccinos, lattes, and numerous other specialty drinks. Coffee preparation itself became an art. Baristas refined their skills. Customers developed preferences regarding roast levels, brewing methods, and flavor profiles. Coffee was no longer simply coffee. It had become an experience. During the late 20th century, another major transformation occurred. Large international coffee chains began expanding rapidly. Companies such as Starbucks helped introduce café culture to millions of people. Coffee shops evolved into places where people worked, studied, socialized, and relaxed. Comfortable chairs, wireless internet, and carefully crafted beverages created entirely new environments. The modern coffee shop became something more than a business. It became a third place. Neither home nor workplace, but a social space somewhere in between. Today, coffee remains one of the most widely consumed beverages on Earth. Every day, billions of cups are enjoyed around the globe. Farmers cultivate coffee across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Complex international supply chains transport beans across oceans and continents. Meanwhile, consumers continue searching for the perfect cup. Some prefer traditional brewing methods passed down through generations. Others embrace new technologies, from single-serve machines to precision brewing equipment. Yet despite all these changes, coffee continues serving the same fundamental purpose it has fulfilled for centuries. It brings people together. It marks the beginning of the day. It provides comfort, warmth, and moments of reflection. From the mountains of Ethiopia to cafés in every corner of the world, coffee's journey has been extraordinary. And remarkably, that journey continues even today. As coffee spread across continents, it did more than simply introduce a new beverage. It created entirely new spaces. These spaces would eventually become some of the most important meeting places in human history. They were known as coffee houses. Today, visiting a café is a common experience. People meet friends, work on laptops, read books, or simply enjoy a quiet cup of coffee. But centuries ago, coffee houses represented something truly revolutionary. Our story begins once again in the Middle East. By the 16th century, coffee houses had become a familiar sight in cities throughout the Ottoman Empire. In Istanbul, Cairo, Damascus, and Mecca, coffee houses attracted people from all walks of life. Merchants, scholars, travelers, poets, craftsmen, and government officials all gathered beneath their roofs. A typical Ottoman coffee house was often a lively place. Low wooden tables filled the room. Colorful carpets covered the floors. Brass coffee pots gently steamed over charcoal fires. The rich aroma of freshly roasted coffee drifted through the air. Men sat together for hours. Some played board games. Others discussed politics, literature, religion, and philosophy. Travelers shared stories from distant lands. Musicians occasionally performed for customers. In many ways, the coffee house became the social heart of the city. Not everyone welcomed this development. Some rulers worried about large groups gathering together. After all, whenever people meet regularly to exchange ideas, unexpected discussions often emerge. Political criticism sometimes flourished inside coffee houses. Rumors spread quickly. Opinions circulated freely. Several Ottoman rulers attempted to restrict, or even ban coffee houses. Yet these efforts rarely succeeded. Coffee houses had already become too popular. People simply returned as soon as restrictions ended. As coffee arrived in Europe, the coffee house tradition followed. In England, coffee houses first appeared during the middle of the 17th century. The first known English coffee house opened in Oxford in 1650. Soon afterward, coffee houses began appearing throughout London. Their popularity expanded rapidly. By the early 18th century, London contained hundreds of coffee houses. Each establishment developed its own unique identity. Some catered primarily to merchants. Others attracted writers and intellectuals. Still others became gathering places for politicians or scientists. Customers often paid a single penny for admission. For this modest fee, they received a cup of coffee and access to conversation. Because of this, coffee houses earned an unusual nickname. They became known as penny universities. For the cost of a penny, a visitor could engage with some of the brightest minds of the age. A merchant might discuss trade routes. A philosopher could debate ideas. A scientist might describe recent discoveries. Many people considered coffee houses informal centers of education. Several important institutions trace their origins directly to coffee houses. One famous example is Lloyd's of London. In the late 17th century, ship owners and merchants frequently met at Edward Lloyd's coffee house. There, they exchanged shipping information and arranged insurance agreements. Over time, these informal meetings evolved into one of the world's most important insurance organizations. Similarly, newspapers often developed close relationships with coffee houses. Journalists gathered information from conversations taking place inside these establishments. Many customers visited specifically to hear the latest news. Before modern technology, coffee houses functioned as important information networks. In France, coffee houses became equally influential. Parisian cafés attracted artists, writers, and philosophers. Thinkers associated with the Enlightenment often gathered in cafés to exchange ideas. Voltaire, Rousseau, and countless others spent many hours discussing philosophy while drinking coffee. Some historians believe that cafés played an important role in shaping intellectual life during this period. Even revolutionary ideas sometimes circulated within their walls. Across Europe, coffee houses slowly transformed society. They encouraged conversation. They promoted literacy. They connected individuals from different social backgrounds. They provided spaces where ideas could be exchanged freely. And perhaps most importantly, they demonstrated the remarkable ability of coffee to bring people together. Centuries have passed since the first great coffee houses opened their doors. Yet their legacy remains visible today. Modern cafés continue serving as places of conversation, creativity, work, and relaxation. The furniture may have changed. The menus may have expanded. Wireless internet may now replace handwritten letters. But the essential experience remains surprisingly familiar. People still gather. Coffee is still shared. Stories are still told. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of a cafe, conversations continue just as they have for hundreds of years. As our journey through coffee history continues, we will soon discover how coffee traveled even farther, eventually transforming entire nations and reshaping the global economy itself. By the beginning of the 19th century, coffee had already established itself as one of the world's favorite beverages. Coffee houses thrived across Europe. Plantations stretched across the Caribbean. Merchants transported coffee beans across oceans and continents. Yet one nation would eventually come to dominate the global coffee industry more than any other. That nation was Brazil. Today, Brazil is almost synonymous with coffee. For generations, it has remained the world's largest coffee producer. But this remarkable relationship began rather modestly. According to popular legend, coffee first arrived in Brazil in the year 1727. At the time, European colonial powers were fiercely protective of their coffee plants. Coffee represented wealth. Whoever controlled coffee production could potentially generate enormous profits. Portugal, which controlled Brazil, was eager to begin cultivating coffee. However, obtaining fertile coffee plants was not easy. A Portuguese officer named Francisco de Melo Palhita was sent on a diplomatic mission to neighboring French Guiana. Officially, his purpose was to settle a border dispute. Unofficially, he had another objective. He was expected to acquire coffee seeds. The story that followed has become part of coffee folklore. According to tradition, Palhita charmed the wife of the French governor. When it came time for him to return home, she secretly presented him with a bouquet containing hidden coffee seeds. Whether entirely true or not, coffee plants soon arrived in Brazil. At first, cultivation remained relatively limited. But Brazil possessed several important advantages. The country's climate proved ideal. Large regions offered fertile soil, abundant rainfall, and warm temperatures. As coffee demand continued increasing throughout Europe and North America, Brazilian coffee production expanded dramatically. During the 19th century, coffee plantations spread rapidly across southeastern Brazil. Entire landscapes were transformed. Vast estates, known as fazendas, covered enormous areas of land. Rows upon rows of coffee trees stretched across rolling hills as far as the eye could see. Coffee quickly became one of Brazil's most valuable exports. Cities grew. Railways were constructed. Ports expanded. The nation's economy increasingly depended upon coffee. By the late 19th century, Brazil supplied a significant proportion of the world's coffee. Some estimates suggest that Brazil was responsible for nearly 80% of global production. Yet this extraordinary success came at a profound human cost. Like many plantation economies in the Americas, Brazilian coffee production relied heavily upon enslaved labor. Millions of enslaved Africans were transported to Brazil over several centuries. Many were forced to work under extremely difficult conditions on coffee plantations. The labor was demanding. Workers often spent long hours planting, maintaining, and harvesting coffee trees beneath the tropical sun. The history of coffee in Brazil cannot be understood without acknowledging this painful legacy. Slavery remained legal in Brazil until 1888, making it one of the last countries in the Western Hemisphere to abolish the institution. Following abolition, plantation owners increasingly relied upon immigrant labor. Large numbers of immigrants arrived from Italy, Germany, Japan, and other countries. Many found employment within Brazil's expanding coffee industry. Coffee shaped not only Brazil's economy, but also its politics. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, wealthy coffee producers held considerable influence. Historians sometimes refer to this period as the era of coffee with milk politics, reflecting the political alliance between coffee-producing regions and dairy-producing states. Coffee revenues funded infrastructure projects. Railroads expanded deep into the countryside. Modern cities emerged. São Paulo, now one of the largest cities in the world, experienced extraordinary growth largely because of coffee wealth. Meanwhile, global demand for coffee continued increasing. Millions of people began each morning with a cup. Coffee became an essential part of daily life. As production increased, new challenges emerged. Weather occasionally devastated harvests. Economic crises affected prices. Overproduction sometimes created enormous surpluses. At times, Brazilian authorities even destroyed excess coffee supplies in an effort to stabilize global prices. Millions of sacks of coffee were burned or otherwise removed from the market. Such measures illustrate just how central coffee had become to the Brazilian economy. Even today, Brazil remains one of the giants of the coffee world. Modern Brazilian farms employ advanced technologies. Some harvests utilize sophisticated machinery. Others continue relying upon traditional methods developed generations ago. Despite these changes, the fundamental process remains familiar. Coffee cherries are carefully harvested. Beans are processed, dried, roasted, and eventually transported across the globe. From the hillsides of Brazil, coffee journeys onward to kitchens, cafés, and coffee shops in nearly every nation on earth. And for countless people, the day still begins with beans that may have started their journey thousands of miles away on a Brazilian plantation. As we continue our exploration of coffee's remarkable history, we will next discover how coffee rituals evolved in different cultures, creating unique traditions that continue to this very day. As we continue our peaceful journey through the history of coffee, let us now slow down and imagine an ordinary day on a coffee plantation during the 18th century. Our destination is Colonial, Brazil. The year is approximately 1780. The sun has not yet risen. The air is cool and still. Mist hangs low over the rolling hills. In the darkness, the coffee trees stand silently in endless rows, stretching across the landscape. Soon, however, the plantation will awaken. Long before sunrise, activity begins. Workers rise from their simple homes. Many plantations consist of modest dwellings built from wood, mud bricks, or stone. Life here is not luxurious. Furniture is sparse. Living conditions are often basic. A simple meal is prepared before the day's labor begins. Breakfast might consist of bread, maize porridge, beans, or cassava. For many workers, this meal must provide enough energy for the long hours ahead. As dawn approaches, the first rays of sunlight slowly illuminate the plantation. Birdsong fills the air. The surrounding forests come alive. The tropical landscape is rich with sounds. Insects hum softly. Leaves rustle in the morning breeze. By sunrise, work is already underway. Coffee farming is labor-intensive. Throughout the year, the coffee trees require constant attention. Young plants must be carefully nurtured. Weeds must be removed. Soil conditions must be monitored. Branches occasionally need pruning. Farmers quickly learn that successful coffee cultivation demands patience. Coffee trees do not produce beans immediately. Several years may pass before a newly planted tree yields its first significant harvest. For plantation owners, this requires long-term planning. For workers, it means endless cycles of maintenance and care. During harvest season, activity intensifies dramatically. Coffee cherries do not all ripen at exactly the same time. Experienced workers carefully inspect each branch. Ripe cherries display deep red or sometimes yellow colors, depending upon the variety. Unripe fruit must remain on the tree. Harvesting requires both skill and concentration. Workers move slowly along the rows. Hands reach gently into the branches. One cherry after another is collected. Baskets gradually fill. The work can continue for many hours beneath the tropical sun. Temperatures rise steadily throughout the morning. The heat becomes increasingly intense. Shaded areas provide brief moments of relief. Occasionally, workers pause to drink water or share simple meals. Conversation helps pass the time. Stories are exchanged. Songs may be sung. Human beings have always found ways to create community, even during difficult labor. As the day progresses, harvested cherries are transported for processing. This stage is essential. Freshly picked coffee cherries cannot simply be stored. They must be processed relatively quickly. On many 18th century plantations, workers spread the harvested cherries across large drying patios. These open spaces are carefully designed to maximize sunlight exposure. For days or even weeks, the cherries dry beneath the sun. Workers regularly turn them using wooden tools. This ensures even drying and prevents spoilage. Weather constantly influences the process. Unexpected rainstorms can create serious problems. At the first sign of rain, workers rush to protect the drying coffee. Timing is critical. Too much moisture can ruin an entire harvest. Too little drying may affect quality. Coffee farming has always involved considerable uncertainty. Nature ultimately determines success or failure. Droughts, storms, pests, and disease all pose risks. Even experienced farmers cannot control every variable. As afternoon gradually transitions toward evening, work slowly concludes. Baskets have been emptied. Tools are cleaned and stored. The plantation grows quieter. Workers return home. Simple evening meals are prepared. Families gather together. Candles or oil lamps provide light after sunset. Without electricity, daily life follows the rhythms of nature. People often retire early. Tomorrow, the cycle will begin again. For plantation owners, evenings may involve reviewing accounts, calculating harvest yields, or corresponding with merchants. Coffee has become a global commodity. Ships arriving in distant ports depend upon successful harvests. Prices fluctuate in response to events occurring thousands of miles away. Even in the 18th century, coffee farming is already part of an increasingly interconnected world. Yet despite these global connections, much of daily plantation life remains local and deeply tied to the land. The changing seasons determine planting and harvest. Rainfall influences every decision. Generations of farmers accumulate knowledge through experience. They learn to read the landscape. They observe weather patterns. They understand the needs of their trees. Coffee farming demands patience unlike many other forms of agriculture. Trees mature slowly. Harvests vary. Rewards often come only after years of careful labor. Perhaps this helps explain why coffee has always inspired such devotion. Behind every cup lies an extraordinary amount of human effort. Countless hands participate in coffee's long journey from tree to table. Farmers plant and harvest. Workers process and transport. Merchants trade and distribute. Roasters carefully develop flavor. Finally, somewhere far away, a cup is prepared. The drink may last only a few minutes. Yet its story stretches across continents, generations, and centuries. And tomorrow morning, as the sun once again rises over the plantation, the quiet work of growing coffee will begin anew. As we continue our slow and peaceful exploration of coffee's remarkable history, let us now travel back several centuries to the Arabian Peninsula. The year is approximately 1500. Our destination is Yemen, a mountainous land overlooking the Red Sea. It is here, among rugged hills and ancient trade routes, that coffee first began to resemble the beverage we know and enjoy today. Long before espresso machines, electric grinders, or modern cafés, The people of Arabia had already developed sophisticated methods for preparing coffee. The process began with the harvest. High in the mountains, coffee farmers carefully tended their trees on steep terraces carved into the hillsides. The climate was ideal. Warm days, cool nights, and seasonal rains allowed coffee plants to flourish. When the cherries ripened, they were harvested by hand. Each cherry contained the precious seeds that would eventually become coffee beans. Once harvested, the cherries required processing. In medieval Arabia, this work was performed entirely by hand. Workers first spread the cherries out beneath the sun. For days, sometimes even weeks, the fruit slowly dried. The intense Arabian sunlight gradually removed moisture from the cherries. Throughout the drying process, workers regularly turned the fruit to ensure even exposure. Once sufficiently dried, the outer layers were removed. This often required considerable physical effort. Simple tools and manual labor performed tasks now handled by modern machinery. After processing, the green coffee beans were stored until needed. Unlike modern coffee culture, where roasted beans are often purchased ready for brewing, medieval households typically roasted coffee themselves. Roasting was an important skill. Families carefully heated the beans over open fires using metal pans or shallow roasting vessels. The beans crackled softly as they roasted. Gradually, rich aromas filled homes and marketplaces. Experienced roasters learned to judge the perfect moment to remove the beans from heat. Too little roasting produced weak flavors. Too much roasting could ruin the entire batch. Each household often developed its own preferences. Some preferred lighter roasts. Others favored darker, stronger flavors. After roasting came grinding. This process required patience. Coffee beans were usually ground using mortars and pestles. The rhythmic sound of grinding became a familiar part of daily life. Stone, wood, or metal tools transformed roasted beans into fine powder. Only then could brewing begin. Traditional Arabian coffee was often prepared in small metal pots. Water was heated over charcoal fires. Ground coffee was added directly to the water. Sometimes spices such as cardamom were included. Cardamom remains closely associated with Arabian coffee even today. The mixture simmered gently. Careful preparation was essential. Coffee making was not rushed. Instead, it was treated almost as a ritual. Patience produced the finest results. Once ready, the coffee was poured into small cups. These cups were often beautifully decorated. Hospitality occupied a central place in Arabian culture. Offering coffee to guests became an important social custom. Visitors were welcomed with warmth and generosity. Refusing coffee could even be considered impolite. Serving coffee demonstrated respect. The ritual itself followed established traditions. The host typically served guests personally. Small amounts were poured at a time. Conversation unfolded slowly. Stories were exchanged. News traveled from one community to another. In many ways, coffee helped strengthen social bonds. Coffee also held special significance within religious communities. Sufi mystics, devoted to long nights of prayer and meditation, found coffee particularly valuable. The beverage helped worshippers remain awake during extended spiritual practices. For many, coffee became associated with contemplation, devotion, and learning. As coffee's popularity increased, marketplaces throughout Arabia developed thriving coffee trades. Merchants transported beans by camel caravan across deserts and mountains. Ports such as Mocha became famous throughout the world. Indeed, the word Mocha, still familiar today, derives from this historic Yemeni port. For centuries, Mocha served as one of the world's most important coffee trading centers. Merchants from distant lands traveled there seeking precious coffee beans. They carried coffee onward to Africa, the Ottoman Empire, Europe, and eventually the wider world. Yet despite coffee's growing fame, preparation methods remained remarkably simple. Fire, water, roasted beans, time. These basic elements created a beverage capable of transforming societies. Modern coffee preparation may involve sophisticated machines, precise measurements, and advanced technologies. Yet the essential principles remain surprisingly familiar. Even today, when we grind beans, heat water, and patiently brew coffee, we participate in traditions established centuries ago in the mountains and marketplaces of medieval Arabia. And somewhere, perhaps in a quiet home overlooking the hills of Yemen, coffee may still be prepared much as it was hundreds of years ago. Slowly, carefully, and always with hospitality. As we continue our gentle journey through the history of coffee, let us now turn our attention to a remarkable period in human history known as the Age of Exploration. The Age of Exploration, sometimes called the Age of Discovery, began during the 15th century and continued for several hundred years. It was an era of great voyages. European sailors crossed vast oceans. New trade routes were established. Distant continents became connected in ways previously unimaginable. And among the many goods that traveled across these expanding networks was coffee. At the beginning of the 15th century, coffee remained largely confined to the Arabian Peninsula and parts of East Africa. Most Europeans had never heard of it. Those who had often regarded it as an exotic curiosity from distant lands. But this would soon change. As maritime technology improved, European nations increasingly ventured beyond familiar waters. Portugal and Spain led the way. Their ships explored the coasts of Africa, crossed the Atlantic Ocean, and eventually established trade routes stretching around the globe. These voyages transformed world history. Spices, textiles, precious metals, and countless other products began moving between continents. Coffee would eventually join this growing global trade. The Ottoman Empire played an important role in coffee's early spread. Stretching across parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa, the Ottoman Empire controlled many important trade routes. European merchants traveling through Ottoman territories frequently encountered coffee for the first time. Venetian traders were particularly influential. Venice had long maintained extensive commercial relationships with the Eastern Mediterranean. By the early 17th century, Venetian merchants were importing coffee into Europe. At first, coffee remained expensive. Only wealthy individuals could afford to enjoy it regularly. Small quantities arrived aboard merchant vessels after long and often dangerous journeys. Ocean travel during the Age of Exploration was not easy. Ships faced numerous challenges. Storms could appear suddenly. Pirates sometimes attacked merchant vessels. Disease frequently spread among crews. Navigation remained uncertain. Many voyages lasted for months. Despite these difficulties, global trade continued expanding. European powers soon realized that coffee represented enormous economic potential. Demand was growing rapidly. Consumers wanted more coffee than Arabian producers alone could supply. As a result, European colonial powers sought new regions suitable for coffee cultivation. The Dutch were among the first to succeed. During the late 17th century, Dutch traders transported coffee plants to their colonies in Southeast Asia. The island of Java proved especially favorable. Coffee plantations flourished. Soon, coffee from Java was being shipped throughout Europe. The French, Portuguese, and Spanish followed similar strategies. Coffee plants gradually spread across tropical regions around the world. The age of exploration had transformed coffee from a regional beverage into a global commodity. Coffee now traveled immense distances. A bean harvested in the mountains of Java might eventually be consumed in Paris. Coffee grown in the Caribbean could be enjoyed in London. For perhaps the first time in history, millions of people across different continents shared a common daily ritual. Coffee also influenced exploration itself. Long sea voyages often depended upon carefully managed supplies. Although fresh coffee was not always available aboard ships, coffee increasingly became part of maritime life. Sailors, merchants, and explorers carried coffee with them as they ventured into unfamiliar territories. In ports around the world, coffee houses emerged as important gathering places. Travelers exchanged information. Merchants negotiated business agreements. News from distant lands spread rapidly. Maps were studied. Future voyages were planned. The coffee house became, in many ways, a companion to exploration. As global connections strengthened, coffee consumption expanded dramatically. Entire economies became linked through coffee production and trade. Farmers in distant colonies cultivated beans for consumers they would never meet. Merchants coordinated shipments across oceans. Roasters and traders developed increasingly sophisticated commercial networks. The world was becoming interconnected. Coffee stood at the center of this transformation. Yet global expansion also carried significant consequences. Colonial systems often relied upon exploitation and unequal relationships. Plantation agriculture frequently depended upon forced labor. Many of the profits generated through coffee came at tremendous human cost. The history of coffee during the age of exploration therefore reflects both remarkable innovation and profound hardship. It is a complex story. A story of curiosity, commerce, ambition, and human resilience. And as the centuries passed, coffee continued its extraordinary journey. From remote mountain terraces to bustling seaports. From wooden sailing ships to elegant European coffee houses. From local tradition to global habit. Coffee had truly become a drink of the world. And its story was still far from complete. As coffee spread across continents over the centuries, people in different cultures gradually made the beverage their own. Although coffee may have originated in East Africa and first flourished in Arabia, it eventually found a home in countless societies around the world. Each culture developed unique traditions, rituals, and customs surrounding the preparation and enjoyment of coffee. Tonight, let us slowly travel across the globe and explore some of these fascinating coffee rituals. Our journey begins where coffee itself was born. Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, coffee is far more than a simple drink. It is an important social ritual. Traditional Ethiopian coffee ceremonies remain a central part of daily life even today. The ceremony often begins with the roasting of green coffee beans. The beans are placed in a shallow pan and roasted over an open flame. As they roast, rich aromas slowly fill the room. The host frequently walks around, allowing guests to enjoy the fragrance. The freshly roasted beans are then ground by hand using a mortar and pestle. Next, the coffee is brewed in a traditional clay pot known as a jabina. The brewing process is slow and deliberate. Conversation unfolds naturally. Family members, neighbors, and friends gather together. The entire ceremony may last for an hour or more. In Ethiopian culture, the coffee ceremony represents hospitality, friendship, and community. From Ethiopia, let us travel north to the Arabian Peninsula. In many Arab countries, coffee remains deeply connected to hospitality. Traditional Arabic coffee, often called kawa, is usually lightly roasted and flavored with cardamom. It is commonly served in small handleless cups. The host pours coffee from an elegant pot known as a dalla. Guests are typically served several small portions. The ritual itself follows established customs. The host serves the eldest or most honored guests first. Visitors rarely pour coffee for themselves. Instead, serving coffee remains the responsibility of the host. In many communities, offering coffee symbolizes generosity and respect. Now let us continue our journey to Turkey. Turkish coffee possesses one of the world's oldest and most distinctive brewing traditions. Finely ground coffee is combined directly with water in a small metal pot known as a sezv. The mixture is heated slowly over low heat. Unlike many modern brewing methods, the coffee grounds remain in the cup. As a result, Turkish coffee develops a rich, intense flavor. Traditionally, a layer of foam forms on the surface. Creating this foam is considered an important skill. Turkish coffee also carries cultural significance beyond the beverage itself. For centuries, coffee houses have served as important social spaces. Additionally, fortune-telling using coffee grounds remains a popular tradition. After drinking, some people invert the cup onto a saucer. Once cooled, patterns formed by the remaining grounds are interpreted as symbols of future events. Whether taken seriously or simply enjoyed for entertainment, this tradition continues today. Our next destination is Italy. Italian coffee culture differs significantly from many other traditions. In Italy, coffee often means espresso. Strong, concentrated, and served quickly. Many Italians begin their day by visiting a neighborhood café. Customers frequently stand at the counter rather than sit down. The experience is brief. An espresso is consumed within minutes. Then life continues. Certain customs are widely observed. For example, cappuccinos are traditionally consumed only during the morning. Ordering one after lunch or dinner may surprise local residents. Italian coffee culture emphasizes routine, efficiency, and consistency. Now let us travel to Scandinavia. Countries such as Finland, Sweden, and Norway rank among the world's highest coffee consumers. In Sweden, a cherished tradition known as fika occupies an important place in daily life. Fika is much more than simply drinking coffee. It represents a pause, an opportunity to slow down. Friends, colleagues, and family members gather together over coffee and pastries. Conversation becomes the focus. In modern societies often characterized by busyness, fika encourages people to pause and reconnect. Across the world in Japan, coffee culture developed later but evolved in unique ways. Japanese coffee preparation often emphasizes precision and craftsmanship. Pour-over brewing methods became particularly popular. Attention to detail is paramount. Every step is carefully considered. Water temperature, pouring technique, grinding consistency. The result is often a remarkably refined coffee experience. Many Japanese coffee shops cultivate peaceful, almost meditative atmospheres. Silence and reflection are valued. Coffee becomes an opportunity for contemplation. As our journey slowly comes to an end, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Although coffee rituals vary enormously across cultures, certain themes remain universal. Hospitality, community, conversation, reflection. Across centuries and continents, coffee has consistently brought people together. The cups may differ. The brewing methods may change. The traditions may vary. Yet the simple act of sharing coffee continues to unite people around the world. And perhaps that is one of coffee's greatest achievements. Not merely keeping us awake, but helping us connect with one another, one cup at a time. As coffee spread across continents over the centuries, people in different cultures gradually made the beverage their own. Although coffee may have originated in East Africa and first flourished in Arabia, it eventually found a home in countless societies around the world. Each culture developed unique traditions, rituals, and customs surrounding the preparation and enjoyment of coffee. Tonight, let us slowly travel across the globe and explore some of these fascinating coffee rituals. Our journey begins where coffee itself was born. Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, coffee is far more than a simple drink. It is an important social ritual. Traditional Ethiopian coffee ceremonies remain a central part of daily life even today. The ceremony often begins with the roasting of green coffee beans. The beans are placed in a shallow pan and roasted over an open flame. As they roast, rich aromas slowly fill the room. The host frequently walks around, allowing guests to enjoy the fragrance. The freshly roasted beans are then ground by hand using a mortar and pestle. Next, the coffee is brewed in a traditional clay pot known as a jabina. The brewing process is slow and deliberate. Conversation unfolds naturally. Family members, neighbors, and friends gather together. The entire ceremony may last for an hour or more. In Ethiopian culture, the coffee ceremony represents hospitality, friendship, and community. From Ethiopia, let us travel north to the Arabian Peninsula. In many Arab countries, coffee remains deeply connected to hospitality. Traditional Arabic coffee, often called kahwa, is usually lightly roasted and flavored with cardamom. It is commonly served in small handleless cups. The host pours coffee from an elegant pot known as a dalla. Guests are typically served several small portions. The ritual itself follows established customs. The host serves the eldest or most honored guests first. Visitors rarely pour coffee for themselves. Instead, serving coffee remains the responsibility of the host. In many communities, offering coffee symbolizes generosity and respect. Now let us continue our journey to Turkey. Turkish coffee possesses one of the world's oldest and most distinctive brewing traditions. Finely ground coffee is combined directly with water in a small metal pot known as a sieve. The mixture is heated slowly over low heat. Unlike many modern brewing methods, the coffee grounds remain in the cup. As a result, Turkish coffee develops a rich, intense flavor. Traditionally, a layer of foam forms on the surface. Creating this foam is considered an important skill. Turkish coffee also carries cultural significance beyond the beverage itself. For centuries, coffee houses have served as important social spaces. Additionally, fortune-telling using coffee grounds remains a popular tradition. After drinking, some people invert the cup onto a saucer. Once cooled, patterns formed by the remaining grounds are interpreted as symbols of future events. Whether taken seriously or simply enjoyed for entertainment, this tradition continues today. Our next destination is Italy. Italian coffee culture differs significantly from many other traditions. In Italy, coffee often means espresso. Strong, concentrated, and served quickly. Many Italians begin their day by visiting a neighborhood café. Customers frequently stand at the counter rather than sit down. The experience is brief. An espresso is consumed within minutes. Then life continues. Certain customs are widely observed. For example, cappuccinos are traditionally consumed only during the morning. Ordering one after lunch or dinner may surprise local residents. Italian coffee culture emphasizes routine, efficiency, and consistency. Now let us travel to Scandinavia. Countries such as Finland, Sweden, and Norway rank among the world's highest coffee consumers. In Sweden, a cherished tradition known as fika occupies an important place in daily life. Fika is much more than simply drinking coffee. It represents a pause, an opportunity to slow down. Friends, colleagues, and family members gather together over coffee and pastries. Conversation becomes the focus. In modern societies often characterized by busyness, fika encourages people to pause and reconnect. Across the world in Japan, coffee culture developed later but evolved in unique ways. Japanese coffee preparation often emphasizes precision and craftsmanship. Pour-over brewing methods became particularly popular. Attention to detail is paramount. Every step is carefully considered. Water temperature, pouring technique, grinding consistency. The result is often a remarkably refined coffee experience. Many Japanese coffee shops cultivate peaceful, almost meditative atmospheres. Silence and reflection are valued. Coffee becomes an opportunity for contemplation. As our journey slowly comes to an end, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Although coffee rituals vary enormously across cultures, certain themes remain universal. Hospitality, community, conversation, reflection. Across centuries and continents, coffee has consistently brought people together. The cups may differ. The brewing methods may change. The traditions may vary. Yet the simple act of sharing coffee continues to unite people around the world. And perhaps that is one of coffee's greatest achievements. Not merely keeping us awake. As we continue our peaceful exploration of coffee's long history, we now arrive at one of the most turbulent periods in modern history. The 20th century. An era marked by global conflict, profound change, and unprecedented challenges. Yet even during times of war, one familiar comfort remained remarkably important: coffee. For millions of soldiers and civilians alike, coffee provided warmth, routine, and a small sense of normality amidst uncertainty. Our story begins in the years leading up to the First World War. By the early 20th century, coffee had become firmly established in many societies around the world. Morning coffee was already a daily ritual for countless people. Coffee houses thrived in cities large and small. International trade networks transported enormous quantities of beans across oceans. Then, in 1914, war erupted in Europe. The conflict would eventually involve nations from nearly every continent. As millions of soldiers mobilized, military leaders quickly recognized the value of coffee. Life on the front lines was exhausting. Soldiers endured long periods of waiting, harsh weather, limited sleep, and constant stress. Under such conditions, coffee became an essential companion. A warm cup offered more than simple refreshment. It provided comfort, familiarity, a brief escape from the realities of war. Field kitchens often prepared large quantities of coffee whenever circumstances allowed. In trenches stretching across Europe, soldiers sometimes shared coffee during rare moments of calm. These small rituals helped sustain morale. Letters written by soldiers frequently mentioned coffee. Many described how deeply they appreciated even a modest cup. When the First World War finally ended in 1918, millions returned home carrying habits formed during military service. Coffee consumption continued expanding. Yet an even greater global conflict lay ahead. The Second World War began in 1939. Like the previous war, it transformed everyday life around the world. Coffee once again played an important role. This time, however, new technologies significantly altered how coffee was supplied. One innovation proved especially important: instant coffee. Although instant coffee had existed in various forms for decades, improvements during the early 20th century made it increasingly practical. Products such as Nescafé allowed coffee to be prepared quickly and easily. For military organizations, this convenience proved invaluable. Large quantities of instant coffee accompanied troops serving in Europe, North Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. Soldiers often carried coffee as part of their standard rations. Preparing a hot drink in difficult conditions could provide tremendous psychological comfort. Imagine, for a moment, a cold winter morning somewhere in Europe during the 1940s. Snow covers the landscape. A group of weary soldiers gathers around a small fire. Someone boils water. Instant coffee is carefully prepared. For a few precious minutes, the familiar aroma fills the air. Conversation begins. Memories of home are shared. Despite the uncertainty surrounding them, the simple act of drinking coffee creates a brief moment of peace. Such scenes occurred countless times throughout the war. Coffee became deeply associated with resilience. Governments understood its importance. Maintaining coffee supplies became a priority whenever possible. Yet wartime conditions frequently disrupted trade. Shipping routes were dangerous. Merchant vessels faced attacks. Certain regions experienced shortages. As a result, many civilians encountered rationing. In some countries, people substituted other beverages when coffee became scarce. Roasted chicory, barley, acorns, and various grains were sometimes used as replacements. These substitutes rarely matched the flavor of genuine coffee. Nevertheless, they provided comfort during difficult times. When peace finally returned in 1945, coffee consumption surged once again. Millions of returning soldiers retained their wartime coffee habits. Economic growth during the post-war decades further expanded coffee's popularity. Coffee breaks became common in workplaces. New brewing technologies appeared. Coffee increasingly became part of everyday domestic life. Television advertisements promoted coffee products. Supermarkets offered growing varieties. Cafes flourished. By the middle of the 20th century, coffee had become one of the world's most important consumer goods. Yet perhaps coffee's greatest contribution during the world wars was not economic. Instead, it was deeply human. During periods of fear, uncertainty, and separation, coffee provided continuity. A small ritual. A reminder of ordinary life. A connection to home. Even today, veterans sometimes recall wartime coffee with remarkable clarity. Not because the coffee itself was extraordinary, but because it represented comfort during extraordinary times. And so, throughout war and peace alike, coffee continued accompanying humanity on its long and often difficult journey through history. One cup at a time. As the 19th century slowly gave way to the 20th, coffee had already established itself as one of the world's favorite beverages. Millions of people began each day with a cup. Coffee houses flourished in cities around the globe. Yet another transformation was about to occur. This transformation would begin in Italy. And it would forever change how many people experienced coffee. Our story begins in the busy cities of northern Italy during the late 19th century. Europe was changing rapidly. Industrialization had accelerated the pace of daily life. Factories operated continuously. Railways connected distant regions. Cities expanded. People increasingly sought efficiency. Even coffee was expected to adapt. Traditional brewing methods often required time. Preparing coffee could take several minutes. For busy workers, merchants, and travelers, this sometimes proved inconvenient. Inventors began searching for faster methods. In 1884, an Italian inventor named Angelo Moriano patented one of the earliest steam-powered coffee machines. Although his invention never achieved widespread popularity, it laid important foundations for future innovations. Several decades later, other inventors refined these early designs. Gradually, the modern espresso machine emerged. The principle was simple yet revolutionary. Instead of allowing water to slowly pass through coffee grounds, machines forced hot water through finely ground coffee under pressure. The process dramatically reduced brewing time. A cup could be prepared in seconds. The resulting beverage differed significantly from traditional coffee. It was concentrated, rich, aromatic, and topped with a delicate layer of foam known as crema. Espresso had arrived. Italian cafes quickly embraced the new technology. Coffee bars appeared throughout cities and towns. Many customers visited several times each day. The experience itself became part of daily life. A typical Italian coffee bar often bustled with activity. Customers entered, ordered an espresso, consumed it while standing at the counter, exchanged greetings with friends or neighbors, then continued with their day. The ritual was brief, yet it remained deeply social. Coffee bars became important community spaces. Regular customers frequently visited the same establishment for years. Baristas learned their preferences. Relationships developed. Entire neighborhoods organized parts of their daily routines around local cafes. Over time, espresso inspired numerous variations. One of the most famous is the cappuccino. Named after the Capuchin monks, whose robes resembled the beverage's color, cappuccino combined espresso with steamed milk and foam. Another variation, the latte, incorporated even larger quantities of milk. These drinks gradually spread beyond Italy. Meanwhile, advances in coffee technology continued. Espresso machines became increasingly sophisticated. Manufacturers introduced electric pumps, improving consistency and quality. Professional baristas refined their techniques. Preparing espresso evolved into a specialized skill. Precision mattered. Grinding size, water temperature, pressure, extraction time. Each factor influenced flavor. Coffee preparation increasingly resembled craftsmanship. Following the Second World War, Italian immigrants carried espresso culture around the world. Cafes serving espresso opened across Europe, North America, Australia, and beyond. Yet global coffee culture would undergo another major transformation during the late 20th century. Large coffee chains began expanding internationally. Perhaps no company symbolized this shift more than Starbucks. Founded in Seattle in 1971, Starbucks initially sold roasted coffee beans and equipment. Later, inspired by Italian espresso bars, company leaders embraced café culture. Their vision extended beyond simply selling coffee. They sought to create welcoming spaces where people could gather, relax, and socialize. The concept proved enormously successful. Coffee shops soon appeared in cities throughout the world. Modern cafes offered something unique. Neither home nor workplace, but a third place. A comfortable environment where people could meet friends, read, study, or work. Soft music played quietly. Comfortable chairs invited customers to linger. Wireless internet eventually became standard. Many individuals began spending hours inside cafes. Coffee culture continued evolving. Independent specialty coffee shops emerged. Roasters experimented with beans from different regions. Consumers became increasingly interested in origin, flavor, and brewing methods. Terms such as single origin, artisan roasts, and third-wave coffee entered everyday language. Coffee was no longer simply a beverage. It had become an experience. Today, café culture exists in countless forms. Some people still prefer traditional neighborhood coffee houses. Others visit modern specialty cafes. Many prepare carefully crafted coffee at home. Yet despite these differences, the essential ritual remains familiar. A pause. A conversation. A quiet moment. A cup shared among friends. From the bustling espresso bars of Italy to contemporary cafes around the world, coffee continues bringing people together. And perhaps that simple human connection remains the most important ingredient of all. As our journey through coffee history continues, we will next explore how coffee farming, trade, and consumption continue evolving in the modern world. As we continue our peaceful journey through the long history of coffee, we now arrive in the modern world. Today, coffee is everywhere. It is served in homes, offices, cafes, airports, hotels, and train stations. Every single day, billions of cups of coffee are consumed around the globe. For many people, the day simply cannot begin without it. Yet behind every cup lies an extraordinarily complex journey. A journey that often begins thousands of miles away. Our story starts on a coffee farm. Most of the world's coffee is grown in a region known as the Coffee Belt. This vast area stretches around the equator and includes parts of Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Countries such as Brazil, Colombia, Ethiopia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Honduras are among the world's largest coffee producers. Coffee plants thrive under very specific conditions. They require moderate temperatures. They prefer high altitudes. They need regular rainfall and fertile soil. For centuries, farmers have carefully selected locations that provide the ideal environment for coffee cultivation. Many modern coffee farms remain family-owned. Some families have cultivated coffee for generations. Knowledge is passed from parents to children. The rhythms of planting, pruning, harvesting, and processing continue much as they have for hundreds of years. However, not all coffee farms are small. In some regions, enormous commercial plantations produce vast quantities of beans each year. These operations may employ hundreds or even thousands of workers. Technology increasingly plays an important role. Machines assist with irrigation, processing, and sometimes harvesting. Yet despite technological advances, much of the world's coffee is still picked by hand. Harvest season remains an especially busy time. Workers move carefully among the trees, selecting ripe cherries. The work is demanding. Harvests often occur on steep mountain slopes where machinery cannot easily operate. Once harvested, the cherries begin another stage of their long journey. They must be processed. There are several methods. One of the oldest is known as the dry process. In this method, entire cherries are spread beneath the sun to dry. Another method, known as the wet process, removes the fruit before drying the beans. Each technique influences flavor. Coffee experts can often identify differences resulting from these processing methods. After processing, the beans are sorted, graded, and packed. Then begins a remarkable journey across oceans and continents. Ships carrying thousands of sacks of green coffee beans travel to ports around the world. From there, the beans are transported to roasting facilities. Roasting is perhaps one of the most important stages in coffee production. Green coffee beans possess relatively little aroma. Only when roasted do they develop the flavors we associate with coffee. Roasters carefully control temperature and timing. Small changes can dramatically influence taste. Some roasts emphasize sweetness. Others highlight acidity or bitterness. Coffee professionals often describe flavors using surprisingly detailed language. Chocolate, caramel, citrus, berries, nuts, floral notes. Modern coffee tasting has become remarkably sophisticated. Specialists known as Q-graders evaluate coffee quality using standardized methods. They assess aroma, flavor, body, acidity, and overall balance. Certain coffees command exceptionally high prices. Rare varieties grown under ideal conditions may sell for astonishing amounts. Meanwhile, consumers have become increasingly interested in where their coffee comes from. Many people now seek information about origin, farming practices, and sustainability. Terms such as fair trade, organic, and shade-grown have become familiar. These movements reflect growing awareness of the challenges faced by coffee farmers. Modern coffee production faces significant difficulties. Climate change presents perhaps the greatest challenge. Coffee plants are sensitive. Changes in temperature and rainfall can reduce yields. Rising temperatures may force farmers to move cultivation to higher elevations. Pests and diseases also threaten production. Scientists and farmers continue searching for solutions. New coffee varieties are being developed. Sustainable farming methods are increasingly encouraged. Researchers hope these efforts will help protect coffee for future generations. At the same time, consumer preferences continue evolving. Cold brew coffee has become popular. Specialty cafes experiment with innovative brewing methods. Home enthusiasts purchase sophisticated equipment. Some consumers prefer traditional preparation. Others embrace modern technology. Yet despite all these changes, certain aspects remain constant. Coffee continues bringing people together. It marks the beginning of mornings. It accompanies conversations. It provides comfort during difficult moments. And for billions of people, it remains one of life's simplest pleasures. From a tiny seed planted in distant soil to a warm cup held between familiar hands, coffee's journey is truly extraordinary. And even now, that journey continues. Every sunrise brings new harvests, new conversations, and new cups shared around the world. As our peaceful journey through the history of coffee gradually approaches the present day, it is natural to wonder what the future might hold for this remarkable beverage. Coffee has survived wars. It has crossed oceans. It has outlived empires. It has adapted to changing tastes, technologies, and societies. Yet today, coffee faces some of its greatest challenges. Our story begins with climate. For centuries, coffee farmers have relied upon relatively stable weather patterns. Coffee plants are surprisingly delicate. They thrive only within specific temperature ranges. Too much heat can damage the plants. Too little rainfall can reduce harvests. Unexpected frosts can destroy entire crops. Traditionally, farmers have understood the rhythms of the seasons. They knew when the rains would arrive. They knew when flowering would begin. They knew when harvest season would come. But in recent decades, these patterns have become less predictable. Scientists studying climate change have observed rising temperatures across many coffee-growing regions. Rainfall patterns have shifted. Extreme weather events have become more frequent in some areas. For coffee farmers, these changes create significant uncertainty. In parts of Central and South America, prolonged droughts have affected harvests. Elsewhere, unusually heavy rainfall has damaged crops. Some experts predict that by the middle of this century, certain traditional coffee-growing regions may become less suitable for cultivation. As temperatures rise, farmers may be forced to move coffee production to higher elevations. Yet suitable land at higher altitudes is often limited. Entire communities may need to adapt. Coffee faces another challenge as well: disease. One particularly serious threat is coffee leaf rust. This fungal disease has affected coffee plants for centuries. However, changing climate conditions have sometimes allowed the disease to spread more easily. Coffee leaf rust attacks the leaves of the plant, reducing productivity and, in severe cases, destroying entire harvests. Farmers throughout Latin America have struggled against outbreaks in recent decades. Researchers and agricultural experts continue searching for solutions. New coffee varieties are being developed. Some are designed to better resist disease. Others are bred to tolerate warmer temperatures. Scientists hope these innovations will help ensure coffee's future. At the same time, many farmers are returning to traditional methods. Shade-grown coffee, for example, has gained renewed attention. Instead of growing coffee in open fields exposed to direct sunlight, farmers cultivate coffee beneath the canopy of larger trees. This approach offers several benefits. The trees provide shade. They help preserve soil moisture. They support biodiversity by creating habitats for birds and insects. And they may help coffee plants better withstand rising temperatures. Consumers are also playing an increasingly important role. Around the world, many people have become more interested in sustainability. They want to know where their coffee comes from. They want to understand how it was produced. Questions about fair wages, environmental protection, and ethical sourcing have become increasingly important. Certification programs such as Fair Trade and Rainforest Alliance seek to address some of these concerns. Although no system is perfect, such initiatives aim to improve conditions for farmers while promoting sustainable agricultural practices. Technology, too, is transforming coffee production. Modern farms increasingly use sophisticated tools. Satellite imagery helps monitor crop health. Weather forecasting systems assist with planning. Sensors measure soil moisture and environmental conditions. Artificial intelligence may one day help farmers predict disease outbreaks or optimize harvest schedules. Even the coffee experience itself continues evolving. Specialty coffee culture has expanded dramatically. Consumers increasingly appreciate subtle differences in flavor. Single-origin coffees have become popular. People now discuss coffee with a level of detail once reserved primarily for fine wines. Home brewing has also undergone a renaissance. Many coffee enthusiasts carefully weigh beans, monitor water temperatures, and experiment with different brewing methods. Yet despite all these innovations, coffee's essential appeal remains remarkably unchanged. A cup of coffee still represents comfort. It still encourages conversation. It still marks the beginning of countless mornings. Perhaps this is why coffee has endured for so many centuries. Human societies change. Technologies evolve. Empires rise and fall. But certain rituals remain. Across the world, billions of people continue to begin their day in much the same way. They heat water. They prepare coffee. They pause. And for a few quiet moments, they simply enjoy the experience. Whatever the future may bring, it seems likely that coffee will continue accompanying humanity on its long journey through history. The methods may change. The farms may evolve. The flavors may diversify. But somewhere, tomorrow morning, someone will almost certainly begin their day with a familiar cup of coffee. And the story will continue. Throughout history, coffee has traveled across continents. It has influenced economies, shaped societies, and connected distant cultures. Yet for most people, coffee has always been something much smaller and far more personal. It has been part of ordinary life. Long before sunrise, in cities and villages around the world, millions of people begin to wake. Some rise eagerly. Others reluctantly leave the comfort of sleep. The world outside may still be dark. Streets remain quiet. Birds have not yet begun their morning songs. And in countless homes, a familiar ritual quietly begins. Water is placed on a stove. A kettle is switched on. Coffee beans are measured. Perhaps they are ground fresh. Perhaps a favorite mug is taken from the cupboard. These small actions are repeated day after day, year after year. Often, they are performed almost without conscious thought. And yet, they carry great significance. For many people, preparing coffee represents the true beginning of the day. Before conversations, before work, before responsibilities, there is coffee. The ritual itself offers comfort. The sound of water boiling, the aroma slowly filling the room, the warmth of the cup held between one's hands. These experiences create a sense of familiarity, a sense of continuity. Even when life changes, these small rituals often remain. Throughout history, people have turned to coffee during important moments. Students have prepared coffee while studying late into the night. Writers have sipped coffee while searching for inspiration. Travelers have enjoyed coffee in unfamiliar places far from home. Friends have shared coffee while celebrating joyful occasions. Families have gathered around coffee tables to discuss everyday events. Coffee has accompanied moments both ordinary and extraordinary. In many households, the morning coffee ritual serves another purpose. It creates time. A few quiet minutes before the demands of the day begin. Modern life often moves quickly. Schedules are busy. Technology constantly competes for attention. Yet coffee frequently encourages people to slow down, to pause, to sit, to reflect, even if only for a few minutes. Across cultures, this pause takes many forms. In Italy, someone may stand briefly at a neighborhood café counter. In Sweden, colleagues may gather for fika. In Ethiopia, an elaborate coffee ceremony may bring families together. Elsewhere, an individual may simply sit alone beside a window, watching the sunrise with a warm cup nearby. The settings differ. The rituals vary. But the underlying experience remains remarkably similar. Coffee creates moments. Moments of stillness. Moments of conversation. Moments of connection. There is something deeply human about sharing a cup of coffee. Throughout history, hospitality has often been expressed through food and drink. Coffee has long played an important role in this tradition. Guests are welcomed. Conversations begin. Stories are exchanged. Relationships are strengthened. Sometimes, life-changing discussions occur over coffee. Business partnerships begin. Friendships form. Ideas emerge. At other times, nothing particularly important happens at all. People simply enjoy each other's company. And perhaps that, too, is important. Coffee also accompanies solitude. Not every cup is shared. Many people treasure solitary coffee rituals. A quiet morning before the household awakens. A peaceful afternoon break. An evening spent reading beside a warm drink. Such moments provide opportunities for reflection. In a world often characterized by noise and distraction, these quiet rituals can be surprisingly meaningful. Historians frequently focus upon great events. Wars, empires, political movements, economic systems. Yet everyday life matters as well. The habits and routines of ordinary people shape history in subtle ways. Coffee, perhaps more than almost any other beverage, has become woven into these routines. Generations have lived their lives accompanied by coffee. Parents teach children family traditions. Favorite recipes are passed from one generation to another. Certain cups become cherished possessions. Particular aromas evoke memories. Even today, the smell of freshly brewed coffee can transport people back through time. A childhood kitchen. A grandparent's home. A favorite café. A distant journey. Coffee possesses a remarkable ability to preserve memory. And so, as we reflect upon coffee's long history, we may discover that its true significance lies not only in commerce or global trade, but in ordinary moments, quiet mornings, shared conversations, simple routines. Because in the end, coffee's greatest achievement may be its ability to accompany humanity through the countless small moments that together make up a lifetime. Tomorrow morning, somewhere in the world, another cup will be prepared. Another conversation will begin. Another quiet ritual will unfold. And coffee's long and gentle story will continue. As we continue our slow journey through the fascinating history of coffee, let us now spend some time with a few remarkable individuals who shared a deep appreciation for this beloved beverage. Throughout history, kings, philosophers, scientists, writers, musicians, and political leaders have all enjoyed coffee. For some, it was simply a daily habit. For others, it became an essential companion to their work. Our story begins in 18th century France. There lived one of Europe's most famous philosophers. His name was Voltaire. Voltaire was a prolific writer and thinker whose ideas helped shape the Enlightenment. He wrote extensively on philosophy, religion, politics, and freedom. According to numerous accounts, Voltaire was also an enthusiastic coffee drinker. Some reports suggest that he consumed dozens of cups each day. The exact number remains uncertain. Historians continue to debate the details. Nevertheless, there is little doubt that coffee played an important role in his daily routine. Voltaire often spent long hours writing, reading, and engaging in intellectual discussions. Coffee, it seems, accompanied much of this work. From France, let us travel to England. There we encounter Samuel Johnson. Johnson was one of the 18th century's most celebrated writers and scholars. He compiled one of the first comprehensive dictionaries of the English language. Johnson frequently visited London's coffee houses. These establishments served as important centers of intellectual life. Writers gathered there. Publishers negotiated agreements. Ideas were exchanged. Johnson himself once described coffee houses as places where people met for conversation and companionship. For many intellectuals of the period, coffee houses functioned almost as second homes. Our next figure is Ludwig van Beethoven. The great German composer is remembered for some of the most beautiful music ever written. Beethoven also possessed very specific preferences regarding coffee. According to stories passed down through the years, he insisted upon counting exactly 60 coffee beans for each cup he prepared. Whether every detail of this story is accurate remains uncertain. Yet it reflects something important. Many coffee drinkers develop highly personal rituals. Beethoven was evidently no exception. The careful preparation of coffee formed part of his daily routine. Perhaps these quiet moments provided inspiration. Or perhaps they simply offered comfort. Either way, coffee accompanied one of history's greatest musical minds. Moving forward into the 19th century, we encounter Honoré de Balzac. Balzac was a French novelist famous for his extraordinary productivity. He wrote an astonishing number of books during his lifetime. Balzac reportedly relied heavily upon coffee. Some accounts suggest that he consumed enormous quantities while writing. He often worked late into the night. Coffee helped sustain these intense periods of creativity. Balzac himself even wrote an essay discussing coffee and its effects. He described how the beverage stimulated thought and encouraged mental activity. Whether one agrees with his observations or not, it is clear that coffee occupied a central place in his life. Coffee also accompanied political leaders. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States, was known for his energetic personality. Stories suggest that Roosevelt enjoyed coffee in generous quantities. Similarly, many 20th century leaders incorporated coffee into their daily routines. Political negotiations, diplomatic meetings, and important discussions frequently occurred over coffee. In many ways, coffee became intertwined with public life. Scientists, too, often appreciated coffee. Laboratories and universities around the world developed strong coffee traditions. Researchers working long hours frequently turned to coffee for refreshment. Albert Einstein, one of history's most famous physicists, spent considerable time in cafes discussing ideas with colleagues. Throughout Europe, cafes often functioned as informal meeting places for scholars and scientists. Conversations held over coffee occasionally contributed to important discoveries. Writers perhaps possessed the strongest association with coffee. From Ernest Hemingway to J.K. Rowling, countless authors have written while accompanied by coffee. Some prefer bustling cafes. Others work quietly at home. Yet the image of the writer seated beside a cup of coffee has become almost universal. Why does coffee appear so frequently in creative life? Perhaps because writing requires patience, thought, reflection. Coffee seems particularly well suited to these activities. It encourages pause. It accompanies concentration. It creates ritual. And rituals often support creativity. Of course, famous individuals are not unique in their appreciation of coffee. Throughout history, ordinary people have enjoyed coffee for remarkably similar reasons. Comfort, conversation, routine. In this respect, kings and laborers, philosophers and farmers, composers and merchants all share something in common: a simple cup of coffee. And perhaps this is one of coffee's most remarkable qualities. Across centuries, social classes, professions, and cultures, coffee has provided a common experience. The names may change. The circumstances may differ. But the ritual remains familiar. A cup is prepared. A moment of pause is taken. And life continues. As our journey through coffee history slowly approaches its conclusion, we are reminded that behind every great historical figure stood ordinary daily routines. And very often, somewhere nearby, there was coffee. As our long and peaceful journey through the history of coffee slowly draws to a close, let us take one final moment to reflect upon the remarkable story we have explored together. It is extraordinary to think that something so familiar, something many of us encounter every single day, possesses such a long and fascinating history. A simple cup of coffee. Warm, fragrant, comforting. Yet behind this ordinary experience lies a story spanning continents, centuries, and countless human lives. Our journey began in the ancient highlands of Ethiopia. There, according to legend, a curious goat herder may have first noticed the unusual effects of coffee berries. Whether the story is entirely true matters less than what it represents. Coffee's humble beginnings. From these distant mountains, coffee slowly began its remarkable journey. It traveled across the Red Sea into Arabia. There, generations of farmers, merchants, scholars, and spiritual communities transformed coffee into the beverage we recognize today. In the bustling markets and ancient cities of Yemen, coffee became deeply woven into daily life. Coffee houses emerged. Ideas were exchanged. Friendships formed. Traditions developed. From Arabia, coffee continued its journey outward. Merchants carried precious beans along caravan routes. Ships transported coffee across oceans. Slowly, almost quietly, coffee spread throughout the world. Empires competed to control its trade. Plantations were established across tropical landscapes. Entire economies grew around its cultivation. The story of coffee became inseparable from the story of humanity itself. Along the way, coffee influenced history in unexpected ways. Coffee houses became centers of learning and discussion. Writers, philosophers, scientists, and political thinkers gathered together. Conversations held over coffee occasionally shaped nations. Newspapers were founded. Business ventures began. Ideas that changed the world were discussed over steaming cups. Yet coffee's significance extends far beyond great historical events. For most people throughout history, coffee has always been something deeply personal. A morning ritual. A gesture of hospitality. A moment of comfort. A quiet pause before the beginning of a busy day. Across cultures and centuries, coffee has accompanied ordinary life. Families have gathered around coffee tables. Travelers have rested in distant cafes. Friends have shared conversations. Workers have paused for brief moments of refreshment. Students have studied late into the night. Writers have searched for inspiration. Farmers have begun their mornings before sunrise. Countless human experiences have unfolded alongside coffee. Even today, billions of people continue these traditions. Each morning, across every continent, kettles begin to boil. Coffee is prepared. Aromas fill kitchens and cafes. Conversations begin. The ritual continues. Perhaps this enduring popularity reveals something important. Human beings have always valued moments of connection, moments of reflection, moments of stillness. Coffee, in its quiet way, has long provided these opportunities. It asks very little. Only a few moments. A cup. A pause. And in return, it offers warmth, familiarity, and companionship. As we look toward the future, coffee's story remains unfinished. Farmers continue cultivating coffee in mountain valleys and tropical hillsides. Scientists search for ways to protect coffee from changing climates. New traditions emerge while ancient customs endure. Generations yet unborn will almost certainly discover coffee for themselves. And so the story will continue, as it has for centuries. One harvest after another. One conversation after another. One cup after another. Perhaps somewhere, at this very moment, someone is preparing their first cup of coffee. Elsewhere, another person is enjoying a familiar morning ritual repeated thousands of times before. Different people, different places, yet connected through a shared experience. A simple beverage, a remarkable history. And now, as our own journey gently comes to an end, it is time to leave behind the mountain terraces, bustling coffee houses, merchant ships, plantations, and cafes that have accompanied us throughout this exploration. Thank you for joining me on this relaxing journey through the surprisingly fascinating history of coffee. If you have enjoyed this peaceful exploration of history, perhaps you will return again for another journey through the stories of the past. Until then, may your coffee always be warm, your mornings peaceful, and your nights restful. Sleep well, and good night.